I know a lot of us would love to cook a little bit more from scratch, make a few more things homemade, but it can seem really overwhelming and time consuming. Today, I'm gonna make it a little bit easier. I am going to show you how I make a whole chicken in the slow cooker, a whole fryer chicken, and how I use it to make 3 delicious family meals, mostly from scratch, but maybe with a little help from a couple of convenience items. These are pretty easy recipes and they're also really affordable. When I am picking out a whole chicken, I'm usually looking for one that's around 6 to 7 pounds if I want to get multiple meals out of it. When my kids were much younger, I used to be able to get away with just a 5-pound chicken and use less meat, but now it's really better if I find one in that 6 to 7 pound range. In addition to the whole chicken that is the size and the brand and the quality that you want, I will pop up a picture on the screen here right now with a list of some of the other things that I purchased at the grocery store to make these 3 meals. These are the things in addition to the whole chicken, plus a few just seasonings and spices that I'm going to be using to make these 3 recipes. There are lots of ways to cook a whole chicken. You can roast it like in a big Dutch oven in the oven, but I find the easiest way, and really the only way that I cook a whole chicken, is to use the slow cooker. Before you put it in your slow cooker or in your Dutch oven, if you're roasting it in the oven, you want to make sure that you check the cavity for anything that might be inside. Sometimes manufacturers or processors will put like the neck or a little plastic bag with the giblets inside. Some people save those things and they use them to make gravy or broth. Honestly, I just discard them if they're in there. And then I just put the whole chicken in the crock pot, and then I chop up some carrots, some celery, some onion, probably about 3 stalks of celery, 3 carrots, a whole onion, rough chop. I will put some of that in the cavity and the rest of it just on the bottom of the crock pot around the chicken. And then you can season it however you want. I have used Italian seasoning, I've used an all-purpose seasoning. On this particular day, I just used some oregano and some seasoned salt. And then I came back later and I added a little bit of rosemary and some garlic powder. I put a few tablespoons of butter on the top and popped the lid on that, and I let mine cook on high for 6 hours. I have a Thermapen, a meat thermometer, that I use to check the internal temperature to make sure everything's done, and 6 hours on high makes this fall off the bone tender. And honestly, I don't even worry if it's breast side up or breast side down in the crock pot. I've done it both ways. In fact, sometimes when I cook it breast side down, all of the juices kind of drip down into the breast meat, which is like the lightest of the meats, you know, it's the leanest, and so it makes it even more flavorful. I don't really worry about that, especially when I'm gonna deconstruct it. I'm gonna take it all apart. For the first meal, I took the easy road, especially since I was cooking the chicken that day, and I just cooked up a little pasta, and I used a trick for the pasta sauce that I've done many times. I used a prepared dip. There are lots of different kinds that you can find in the grocery store, or in this case, I used a flavored cream cheese. It was like a garlic and herb cream cheese. It doesn't have to be whipped cream cheese. It just happened to be the kind that I picked up, and it stirs in really easily to the hot pasta and just a little bit of pasta water. I cooked up some green beans to go along with this, and it was a really easy meal. Just topped the pasta with a little bit of the chicken, had the green beans on the side, and dinner was served. And then after dinner, when the chicken had cooled off a little bit, I was able to separate the meat from the bones, and I put all of the meat into a big container that I can stick in the refrigerator until we are ready to use it again. The bones went back into the slow cooker because we're gonna use them to make broth overnight for another recipe. But in this first cook of the chicken, it yields a beautiful broth. I just put it through the strainer into a pitcher, and usually it gives me about a quart of beautiful, flavorful chicken stock that we are also going to store in the fridge and use later on. I'd like to take a minute to thank today's sponsor, Fabric by Gerber Life. My husband and I are getting ready to celebrate our 19th wedding anniversary, and in the nearly 20 years that we've been together, I think we've been pretty good about staying on top of our budget, about managing and stewarding our money responsibly. Nowadays, we have a little bit more than when we were young 20-somethings just starting out, but even back then we knew something we couldn't afford to be without was quality term life insurance. And now that we have kids, we have even more, because as hard as it is to think about what my family would do if I wasn't around to care for them anymore, the last thing I would want to do is add to the stress of losing a loved one by not providing for their financial security. Fabric is term life insurance that's done all online. So you can do it on your own schedule from the comfort of your own couch. You could even go from start to covered in 10 minutes with no health exam required. Fabric has a rating of excellent on Trustpilot with over 1,900 5-star reviews. Plus there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. You can cancel at any time, and they offer high-quality, flexible plans that will fit your budget and your family's needs. And even if you're young, Now is the time to lock in low rates. Fabric was created for busy parents like you and me. I know a little something about being a busy parent. So join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/cmindymom. That's meetfabric.com/cmindymom, MEET fabric.com/cmindymom. And thank you again to Fabric for sponsoring today's video. Let's get back to it. It is time to get dinner going. I am doing kind of like a chicken pot pie situation. We're gonna use the broth that rendered when we cooked the chicken the other day. It's gonna help make the gravy, gonna be so delicious. And you can make the crust from scratch if you have a good from scratch recipe, but I'm gonna take a shortcut and I am going to use some crescent rolls. You could use like a store-bought crust. You could use biscuits if you wanted. We just prefer crescent rolls to biscuits. So I'm gonna try that out tonight. Let me show you what I'm using to make that, how I'm making it. We'll see how it turns out. If you have stored the stock from cooking the chicken in the refrigerator and it has like a firm top, like everything on the top has hardened up, that is just fine. That's just the fat that has rendered. You can take that out if you don't want it. I like it. It's gonna make it flavorful. And this will liquefy again as soon as we put it over the heat. So don't worry if you have like the broth that's separated. If your stock has separated some, it's okay. Okay, here's what I have out for the chicken pot pie bubble up. I have a couple stalks of celery and about a quarter of onion chopped. I did not chop up any carrot because, ooh, actually it's not out here yet. Hold on. I'm gonna be adding some peas and carrots to the mixture later. Plus I have a potato, which I will peel and dice up really small here in just a minute. And I'll probably use a little minced garlic. I have about 2 to 3 cups of my cooked chicken from the other night. The broth that it rendered, that is about 3 cups in there. I'm gonna be using a cup of half and half plus 3 tablespoons of cornstarch. You've already seen my crescent rolls. To season this, I'm going to use about a half teaspoon of thyme and rosemary, and then salt and pepper to taste. Also, I'm gonna be using a tablespoon of butter because we're gonna get the onions and the celery sauteing in a large skillet on the stove. My onions and celery have been sauteing for 3 or 4 minutes on their own. The onions are starting to get translucent. So I'm gonna add a little bit of garlic. I'm gonna let that saute for just another minute. I just want the garlic to get fragrant. I don't want it to burn. Now I'm adding my chicken stock that I saved from cooking the chicken the other night. And don't worry if it's a little gelatinous. It is going to melt. It's gonna liquefy over the heat very, very quickly. I'm gonna go ahead and add my seasonings. A little thyme, a little rosemary. I love rosemary. Salt, to taste. Pepper, to taste. And my potato. I have chopped this up very, very small so that it will cook very quickly. You don't have to put potatoes in a pot pie. I just like to. I like the added texture. I want to bring this up to a low boil, and I want the potatoes to cook on their own for about 10 minutes before we add anything else to help soften them up. My potatoes have been cooking for about 10 minutes on their own, so I'm going to add about half this bag of peas and carrots. If you want to use mixed vegetables, if you want to change up the veggies you're putting in this, you can probably do that. My chopped cooked chicken. Give that a little stir. And now I'm stirring in 1 cup of half and half with 3 tablespoons of cornstarch. You want to make sure that you stir your cornstarch into a cold liquid. You do not want to add like powdered cornstarch to a hot liquid. It will immediately clump up and make like cornstarch dumplings. It is not good. Don't do it that way. Take the long way, stir the cornstarch into the cold liquid into the half and half, or at least room temperature. I'm gonna bring this back to a simmer and let it simmer for a few minutes just until it starts to thicken. Make sure you stay close by while it's coming up to heat and just kind of give it a stir. It's really easy for this to burn once we add the dairy into it. Once we add that half and half, you wanna make sure you don't bring it up to a boil too quickly because then it might scorch on the bottom. Okay, see how that has thickened up just beautifully? Like the veggies and the chicken and that gravy. You could actually just make the biscuits or make the crescent rolls or some dinner rolls separately and just like serve it like this, I think. But we're gonna go the extra mile. I am adding about half a cup of shredded parm. And then these are my crescent rolls. I went ahead and rolled them up and I'm just gonna place them all throughout the mixture here, just kind of try to evenly space them out. Now I am using an oven safe skillet, so I can actually put this directly into the oven, which has been preheating to 350 degrees. If you are not using an oven safe skillet, you would have to transfer the mixture to a baking dish, to an oven safe baking dish before you did this. So now I'm just gonna pop this into my 350 degree oven, and I'm just gonna let it bake. I'm gonna check on it after about 15 minutes. I just wanna bake it until those crescent rolls are nice and puffy and done. I let mine cook for 15 minutes and then I turned the broiler on, and unfortunately I left it under the broiler for just like 30 seconds too long, and my crescents were just a little bit dark on the tops, but that's okay. I think it's still gonna be really tasty. It was hot as lava when it came out of the oven, so I have let mine set for about 10 minutes, and I'm gonna plate it up with a green salad on the side. You could do whatever veggies you want. That's gonna be dinner tonight. Right now I have some broth going in the slow cooker. I just took the bones from the chicken that I cooked the other night, that I threw them right back in the crock pot. I added an onion and a couple more carrots. I threw some Italian seasoning, some garlic, and also some garlic salt in there, and then I poured about 2 quarts of water. I've had that going on high all morning. Normally I would get this going the night after I cooked the chicken, like I just cooked the broth overnight, but I forgot to get it going. I had stuck the crock pot in the refrigerator a couple days ago when I made the chicken, just to keep everything in the crock pot cold until I was ready to cook the broth up. But it's been going for about 6 hours or so. So I'm gonna give it another hour or 2 to simmer, and then I'm just gonna strain it, and we're gonna have broth to make our last recipe. Once I strained all of my broth, I went ahead and moved it on over to the stove. I thought about making this recipe in the slow cooker, but I decided just to cook it the old-fashioned way on the stove. And confession, I had intended to make the beans from dry beans. I had this half bag of dry Great Northern beans, but just like I didn't get my broth cooking overnight, I didn't get the beans soaking overnight, so I decided instead to just use canned beans. So I've got the rest of my chicken left from the whole chicken we cooked, a can of diced green chilies, a can of hominy, you can use regular corn if you want, and then 2 cans of beans. I went for Great Northern and navy beans. And then I have some oregano, some cumin, onion powder, garlic powder, probably about a teaspoon of each, so I'm using that. And then you can add some salt and pepper to taste. And basically all I'm doing is just throwing all of this stuff into the pot, and I'm gonna simmer it together for a little bit. Everything is cooked. There's nothing really that needs to cook that's raw. I'm just heating everything up together and then letting it simmer with the spices. And then we're gonna add a little bit extra to it to make it just be a little bit more flavorful and hearty here at the end. I decided to add the rind from the Parmesan that you saw in my grocery haul for this little meal plan earlier in the video. This is optional, you don't have to do this. I just think it adds flavor to this kind of soup. I brought that to a simmer. I'm gonna turn this down to low, pop the lid on, and let it simmer all together for at least 30 minutes before we come back to it. And then I'm going to stir in some half and half and some cornstarch, and this is the same thing that I did with the chicken pot pie mixture. I'm gonna make sure that I stir that cornstarch. I used about 3 tablespoons in 1 cup of half and half, and stir that all together in the measuring cup before I pour it into the hot mixture. You wanna make sure that you dissolve that cornstarch. And then it is just about bringing it back up to a simmer and letting it simmer on low. Keep stirring it, stay nearby and stir it so that it doesn't scorch or burn. And I'm just gonna simmer it until it starts to thicken up. You can see here that it's starting to get a little bit thicker. And you could make some cornbread. I really thought about that for this. My kids really like cornbread. You could have some tortilla chips. I just topped mine with a little bit of shredded cheese and some corn chips, like Frito style chips, because we really like something crunchy to top these types of soup with. And that has just been our go-to lately instead of the regular tortilla chips. We are going to be heading for a few changes around here, and I'm going to be talking about that in some of my upcoming videos, but for now you can pick out one of these to watch next, and I'll see you there.